You're live. Since you was born. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to House Government Operations and Military Affairs. Today is Wednesday, January 28th. We're going to spend the morning discussing a handful of bills in the alcohol, Department of Liquor and Lottery realm. And we do have some guests with us to discuss these things as we navigate through them. The first piece we're going to be taking a look at today is H647, an act relating to vinous beverage manufacturers and for fourth class licenses. And we have some familiar faces kicking around. I guess let's start with David Keck.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Good to see you, David.
Outstanding. Likewise, sir. Thank you so much for addressing this bill and for having us on for testimony. Really appreciate it. Thank you all also for your time. I know you guys are got a couple other very busy things going on right now, but thank you, Representative Boyden from the great county of Lamoille, for introducing the bill. And I'll dive right in. I know Rob's in the room as well to add a few comments as well. The Council of Vermont, so I'm speaking on behalf, obviously, of Stella 14 Wines. I'm David Keck. I own said winery and am the legislative liaison for the Vermont Grape and Wine Council. The council supports this, as do I, support this bill because it will give small producers in Vermont the flexibility to responsibly showcase Vermont grown wine in the way that works for individual wineries through tastings, education, food forward events, and while also obviously maintaining clear limits and enforceability, which are obviously important to all of us. I really appreciate Mr. Anderson's overview last week, I think it was, maybe a week and a half ago, of the various licenses available. So I think that set up the groundwork for this discussion pretty well. The first section of this bill, and they're kind of addressing two different but related aspects. The first section increases the amount that a licensee is allowed to pour in a fourth class tasting room establishment. Fourth class licenses being tasting rooms for manufacturers. This is important to me and my business and the members of the Grape and Wine Council for some of the following reasons. That increasing that quantity that we can pour allows our guests to taste several beverages or enjoy a full pour of wine, which in wine, beer, spirits, as it's addressed in the bill, depending on what they would like, giving us more options to encourage return business and provide proper hospitality for whatever people might be interested in when they visit our tasting rooms. Frequently, fourth class tasting rooms are in rural locations in Vermont. So acquiring first class licenses is not always a possibility. First class licenses are available for manufacturers when they manufacture on location, or if it's a full restaurant style setup where we're able to get a full health permit and all of that. So often being in rural areas, we rely on return business to encourage, the financial stability. So not always just tourists coming in and doing a tasting, but also our local community coming in, tasting the beverages that we produce, but then able to actually return and have a glass of wine and support the community in that way. As a quick reminder, servers for fourth class tasting rooms are also required to follow all of the same training that a server or bartender in a full restaurant or bar is required with respect to liability and understanding how to monitor guest consumption. And I think that's mainly important to point out that frequently in this conversation, the concern about liability comes up, and our servers are obviously at the same standard with respect to paying attention to guests coming in, their level of potential previous intoxication, things like that, that might be a concern. The difference in profit is pretty substantial when we're able to pour full glasses of wine. Our profit margins increase substantially, whether that be for wine, beer, cider, spirits, etc. And then this section of the bill would also greatly improve our ability as manufacturers to create spaces that encourage our business goals, contribute to taxes in the state, and also sort of generate community in the rural areas in which our tasting rooms exist. So that's kind of at least from our perspective, the quick overview on the positives for changing this part of the legislation. I think before moving on to the next section, it might be worth pausing here for any questions or thoughts on that section of the bill.
Any hands for this part? To the liability insurance question, I assume because you're serving pores, you're carrying the same style of insurance should an accident occur by someone, operating a motor vehicle once they leave your premises.
Yeah, we're required already to have the same liability, even as the statute currently exists.
Okay, yeah, and I assume that. I just wanted to say it out loud for the sake of the conversation here. And so you're looking at like are these two different structures between the farmer's market location and the tasting room? Or is it the same, because I'm looking at the 2 ounces of malt Vinous ready to drink with a total of 8 on the farmer's market, and then the fortified wines, 1 ounce. And then you're getting the ability to have some more pour capacity within the tasting rooms. Am I reading this correctly?
That's exactly right. The comment was brought up when this was discussed in the past that there was concern that farmers markets pouring full glasses of wine or a full beer would be less safe than people would like them. So they adjusted it so that farmers markets continue to follow the same pour requirements, while tasting room establishments would that would change.
Understood. Yeah, no, they're just structurally a different beast to contend with. So
yeah,
I get why the structure is existing like that. Okay. I mean, I'm the nerd who's been doing this policy for 8 years, so I get it. Any questions?
Well, just one comment on
Yes,
that.
please. Can you identify yourself for the record, please?
My name is Rob Natnick. I'm from Ellison Estate Vineyard. I'm also on the Vermont Wine and Grain Council, their education secretary. Just to point out the difference between farmers market and other fourth class licenses, we have to apply for a separate license for that. So it's easy to distinguish between them. As a producer, you get a fourth class farmers market permit, and then you also have to get a fourth class tasting room permit. So it's easy to distinguish between them, and there's no confusion between them. Just pointing that out. They don't, for whatever reason, they are both put under the headquarters of fourth class licenses. But this further just like makes it a different entity, which they are different. You don't want people at farmers markets walking around with full glasses of wine. That's completely reasonable. No one really wants that.
No, thank you for that distinction. I think that's like an important point of clarity,
Yeah.
that they do function within the umbrella of access to as a fourth class license holder. So appreciate that. All right. Anything else? Back to you, David.
Great. So the second part of this bill is addressing a second first class license establishment. And so I think it's worth kind of articulating this a little bit more clearly because it can get confusing. As a manufacturer, we are permitted to apply for a first class license, which allows us to do full pours, buy from distributors, kind of operate in a different way, provided that that first class license exists at either our manufacturing facility or in a full restaurant format with 3 compartment sinks, etc. Currently, we're as Vinous producers in the state of Vermont, we're allowed to apply for 1 first class license, where the brewers, our malt beverage brewers, are permitted to apply for 2 of those. And so this just changes the statute to create parity between Vinous and malt beverage producers so that we can also apply for a first class license in a second location. The rationale behind this, well, other than the obvious parity that I know that DLL is working hard to kind of iron out a lot of the parity concerns in the statute as it exists right now. But it's important to us now really because of where Vinous production is in the state of Vermont as a growing industry. And so it's really become important to have those first class licenses. One of the largest barriers to growth for vinous producers is education and consumer understanding. And so by being able to have a couple of those locations, one at a vineyard and one maybe in a tasting room location, allows us to do more winery visits, education, food forward events, etc. And all of that sort of experiential farm to market or farm to table programming gives us, with a first class license, the ability to do it in a little bit more event and structured format, wine dinners, things like that, where we can really display the beverages in the way that they're intended. So the hope there is just, again, to create that parity and give us the opportunity to create two, but no more than that, first class licenses.
Okay. And I'm just cruising this language because there's like a couple of older but familiar conversations buried in this text. So operate two licensed establishments pursuant to this subdivision that are located or licensed. And it still has that contiguous with the parcel of land. So it's not like a satellite that's far removed from the location. It has to be linked.
Exactly. No, and so this and Rob and I were just actually chatting about this, that it really, the two parts of this bill are complementary. Like I, for example, don't have a tasting room location that could get a first class permit. It's not in my manufacturing area. It's not, and it doesn't have restaurant facilities. So this does, so that's why the fourth class, the first part of the bill really applies to my style of tasting room that we've had in the past. Whereas Rob and Kendra, for example, have their tasting room at the winery. At the vineyard, as well as their tasting room in Stowe, both of which have the potential for a first class license. So that part really applies to their situation specifically.
Yes, please, sir.
Add further comments. To get a first class license, it has to be at a manufacturing site, and getting a manufacturing site is like no easy task. You first have to get federal approval from the TTB. And then you also have to get state approval.
Acronym bust the TTB for those of us watching at home.
Oh, it's Tobacco Trade Bureau.
Yeah, something like that, right? Yeah. They're the ones that say yay to your labels.
It's a federal alcohol, and they also do firearms.
Yeah.
And tobacco. Yeah, it's their federal DLL.
Yeah.
So we have to get the federal approval to get a manufacturing location. And then once we get that, then we also have to get state approval, which includes town approval. Okay, so these first class licenses are actually very sort of cumbersome to obtain, but it makes a lot of sense in our industry because of just, it's a very small industry, and we often have to have a location where we grow the grapes, and then we might have multiple locations where we're growing the grapes. And then we also have to have a production facility. And the ideal world, they would all be co-located in a very tourist-friendly town and everything like that. But the reality is that these get spread across the state. And so the flexibility of bringing people in, if we already have multiple locations, to actually have this second first-class license is just a great way for us to sort of showcase our wines. And a lot of you probably maybe are thinking Vermont and wine, like what are we doing here? And that's sort of an uphill battle that we as producers, just it's the reality. Like people don't associate Vermont and wine, and that's our biggest challenge, is getting people to just try our wine. Mm-hmm. And once they get to try our wine, we are proud of our product and it sells itself. But getting them in the door is the hardest part. And so a first class license gives us a lot more flexibility to do sort of more like wine pairing type events, bring in a local restaurant to do things. And it's just more flexible and allows us to have more of an experience for our customers. And we found already that that is extremely helpful for getting people to try our wine and fall in love with our wines. Because we're very proud of our product, but no one's going to buy it off the shelf unless they've tried it. And it's finding out. And so both these proposals will just help give us producers flexibility for our business models, and that are going to be different for all the producers. So we're not trying to do anything different. We're just trying to really just come up with ways to showcase our wine.
Mm-hmm. And it's just the old adage, like they got to try it before they buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this just creates.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know the full history of how Vermont beer became a thing, but it is a thing. right? I mean, people come to Vermont for the beer, and it wasn't like that 30 years ago. And so some of these changes, and there was this carve out for malt beverage producers to have 2 first-class licenses. And so we're just asking for sort of parity for that would help us give us flexibility.
Well, and the great irony there is, of course, that you can actually brew beer anywhere, and we can only grow grapes where we can grow grapes and produce the wine. We're as close to those places as possible. And so that bit of flexibility is probably even more important for wine producers than anybody else.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. Yeah, because you're going to be attached to your actual like agricultural aspect of your business, which is going to be in a more rural and less traveled area more often than not. Whereas you put a brewery in any industrial area with a denser population mass. Yeah,
Precisely.
so. Okay. Questions on this one? Well, that I had a schedule too, so feel free to poke away. Anybody else in the gallery tracking this stuff want to comment? Seeing hands.
Since I'm here, I can add.
Cool. I'll tell you what, why don't we drop you in the chair? Just to like keep it a little bit more formal and I'll let you guys like a live and in person / video duet.
I mean, we as an industry it's a very small industry and we're still getting just the word out that we're here. And some of you probably are still thinking like Vermont, why can we grow grapes here? And what we're doing is we're growing new types of grapes that are called hybrid grapes. And so they're crossbreeds of North American varieties with the famous wine varieties that all originated in Europe. Around the Mediterranean, which we have a much different climate than the Mediterranean here. But if you go hiking in the woods here in Vermont, there's tons of native grapevines that just grow wild and they adapted to this climate. But we haven't done the crossbreeding, but the University of Minnesota and Cornell have made this big push over the last 30 or 40 years to hybridize or crossbreed varieties that thrive in these cold climates. And so they're relatively new grapes to the world. Like some of the grapes, the first commercial vintage was only 15 years ago. And so the flavor profile is something that's unique and it makes a really good quality wine, but it's a different flavor profile than stuff coming out of California. And so really getting people to try it is something we really have to advocate for. And so just trying to come up with a flexible business model to adapt to that is really just what we're looking for here. And we really think that these grapes are growing really well in Vermont. Okay, that's been established. Like for the last 20 years, we actually have vineyards that are over 20 years old now. Okay, the grapes are thriving and they're doing well. And it's a great use of some of the land for agricultural purposes that maybe for the not failing dairy industry, but declining dairy industry, like using some of that land for growing grapes is something that potentially could be a very forward-looking thing for the state. So. Yeah, no, just adding comments.
No. Like understanding the as to why from like your perspective is like really important for us when we start like teeing up this decision and how we're going to keep going. So no, I appreciate that. Yes, Rep. Pisnell.
So that I can get a visual, I went to a wine tasting at the vineyard on Route 7. Almost in Burlington, and there's a beer place on the left.
Yeah, Shelburne Vineyards.
Shelburne Vineyard. So would they be required to have a first class because it's there on premise?
So they currently have a first class license at their location there.
And then if they did wine tasting off premise, then they would be required to have.
Well, so they actually have multiple vineyard locations. And so at one of their other vineyard locations, like they have one down in Charlotte, they could open another first class
there. Yeah.
And so Shelburne, the conversation with Shelburne actually precipitated part of this move for the bill because they previously owned the vineyard at Lincoln Peak as well. They were the first purchasers after Chris Granstrom sold it. And they could not get a first-class license at that location, regardless of the fact that they owned the vineyard, owned the tasting room, owned the production facility, but they already had a first-class license at their other location. And so that was actually the first case in which it was challenging because they were like, we would like the same business model here where we've jumped through all the hoops from a federal and state regulation perspective, but we still can't do it because it's not in the statute.
Gotcha.
And we on the council, like we've got a lot of momentum actually in the last few years, and we're trying to push that. And we hope there's a lot of growth, but growth isn't. We're still not going to build a $10 million facility anywhere. Like that's just not where the industry is. And most likely, what will happen for growth is an individual winery will actually have to start somewhere else, brand new, and so they'll almost having multiple manufacturing facilities is something probably the way it's going to evolve. And so having this flexibility again is something that we're looking for.
Okay. Anything else for our guests? If not, we'll hit the pause button until we take up the next bill. But no, thank you for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What we're doing right now is we're just really getting a little bit more granular on some of the proposals that we're gonna like bundle into a bigger piece of alcohol policy.
Okay,
So
great.
appreciate the time.
So much.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, no problem, David. Good to see you.
Likewise.
All right, with that, we got 22 minutes till our next order of business, so we're gonna hit the pause button. Go ahead and take us off.